Ever wonder what murder suspects search online after they got caught? You won't believe what's in their search history. How they thought that they could get away with it is beyond ridiculous. I'm Linda with It's a Crime, so now let's get into it. Suspects have been known to rely on good old Google to answer their most burning questions. But these batch of searches I pulled will truly leave you shaking your head, wondering what the heck was up with that? How can this be real, and how can they think that they'd get away with it? Let's start with number 10, which I think is only fitting, and then we'll count down to the most craziest of searches. Number 10, the Richens case, also dubbed the Google murder. The victim, his estranged wife, Deepti Anurag. Now, I feel like this is only fitting to start off with this case, as it was dubbed the Google murder and is an older case of almost 20 years ago, going back to 2005. On November 18th, 2005, a 34-year-old PhD student named Anurag Johri was at a British university, and he beat his estranged 29-year-old wife, Deepti Anurag, to death with a baseball bat at the University of Birmingham, where she worked. He struck her at least 4 times, fracturing her skull in 3 different places. He claimed that he didn't intend to kill her, but his internet searches showed otherwise. And CCTV cameras apparently showed some of his movements leading up to the murder and recorded sounds, including her screams as she was being bludgeoned to death by him with a bat. After he attacked her, he dragged her body behind a desk and just before reportedly making an attempt to unalive himself. The judge spoke to him and said the tape that was played to the jury demonstrated vividly how terrifying an ordeal it was for her. I have no doubt that the attack was carefully planned and premeditated. Now, the day before the premeditated attack, Anurag logged onto a university computer and made Google searches. He searched how to kill with a baseball bat without being detective, tips with killing with a baseball bat, and how to murder someone and not get caught. I guess he didn't think about not getting caught on the World Wide Web. Not only did he do those searches, but according to my research, he deliberately disguised the bat, which it didn't say how he disguised it, but just said he did, which is no surprise. He also bought it at a sports shop and then went into the university, and he waited until his wife was alone, and then he attacked her. Now, Deepti and Anurag had an arranged marriage and married only 4 years prior in 2001. And the prosecution stated that the suspect had planned the attack because he couldn't accept the fact that his wife had left him and became financially independent and wanted to do her own thing. She left him in August of 2005, and by November, he planned and executed her murder. Now, it only took 2 hours for the jury to deliberate and found him guilty for the vicious attack on Deepti, and in court, the judge called the attack prolonged and ferocious. And Anurag was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2006. But his lawyer gave him the excuse that he wasn't an evil man, but he was just simply suffering from depression. People who knew Deepti said that she had a bubbly personality and a sunny disposition. She had a full-time job as an information assistant at the Learning Resource Center at the university's business school, where she was popular and well-respected, and she was said to have had a very bright future ahead of her. Number 9, the Lindsay Clancy case. The victims, 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan Clancy from Massachusetts. Now, on January 24th of 2023, 33-year-old Lindsay Clancy had started her day by taking her daughter to the pediatrician. She played in the snow with her 3 kids and later sent her husband, Patrick, to pick up some medication from a CVS drugstore and also to pick up some food for dinner for them and their 3 children. When he returned, the house was oddly quiet, and when he searched for his family, it was nothing short of a nightmare. He found his 3 children in the basement with exercise bands around their little necks, but no sign of Lindsay around. And of the children, according to medical examiner, their 3-year-old Dawson was said to have struggled the most and strangled the hardest based on his marks to his neck and face. 2 of the children died there, while 1 was taken to hospital, the youngest one, and he succumbed to his injuries 3 days later. Patrick went up to the couple's bedroom on the 2nd floor to look for Lindsay, but the door was locked and he noticed blood on the floor, and once he was inside the room, the window was open. He then ran outside and found his wife. She was conscious, but she had jumped out of a window after injuring herself with cuts on her wrists and neck in an attempt to end her life. She suffered severe spinal injuries as a result of the jump and ended up being paralyzed from the waist down. Patrick asked Lindsay, "What did you do?" And she just answered with basement. Now, Patrick rushed and called 911 and said to the dispatchers, "She killed the kids." Investigators found 4 medication bottles on scene prescribed to Lindsay, and only weeks before, at the beginning of January, from the 1st to the 5th, she had admitted herself in the hospital, but she was discharged without further concern. And her medications were to treat postpartum depression, which is no easy thing. And she was prescribed in the past with meds including Prozac, Ativan, Benadryl, Seroquel, amitriptyline, and trazodone. But Lindsay tracked her meds carefully in notebooks and on the Notes app on her cell phone. And according to Patrick, he said she was acting like a zombie in the weeks leading up to the deaths. He said that they had a happy marriage, but she confided in him about her thoughts and feelings and struggles of wanting to unalive herself. But if we rewind 3 months before the tragedy, an entry in Lindsay's journal said, "I think I sort of resent our children because they prevent me from treating Callan like my first baby." And Callan is their 3rd child. He was 8 months old when he died, but at this time of her journal entry, he'd be 5 months old. She also wrote, "I want to feel love and connection with all of my kids." And 4 days before the murders, Lindsay used her cell phone and searched, "Can you treat a sociopath?" Now, although the details of her search history wasn't listed in court documents, other than the wording that Lindsay searched in ways to kill, she did something else that is interesting in this case. When she ordered food for her husband to pick up that day, she was more calculated rather than a last-minute snapping. She used Apple Maps on her phone to find out the time it would take to travel from their home in Duxbury, Massachusetts, to a restaurant called 3V in Plymouth, where Patrick would pick up their food for dinner, giving her enough time to execute her plan. Now, according to the prosecution in court, the notes that Lindsay kept were said to be clear, precise, and articulate up until the murders, providing an insight as to her state of mind. However, according to her husband, Lindsay had told him that she had those thoughts of harming herself and ending her life. The prosecution also stated she created the situation and she used Apple Maps to make sure that she would have enough time to strangle each child. She planned these murders and gave herself the time and privacy to commit these murders. Patrick felt that Lindsay was overprescribed medicine, but said that she was having one of her best days that day and no sign that she may harm their kids. He believed that she had severe side effects from the medication, which does happen. Mothers can go through severe postpartum and even psychosis. Lindsay is currently being held without bail at the hospital. She has pled not guilty for the murders of her kids. As of the time of this recording, she has a court date coming up on July 26th of 2024. Patrick stated that he forgives Lindsay. He said to find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have. The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring towards everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients. Lindsay was a nurse. And the very fibers, he says, of her soul are loving. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace. About his kids, he said, Cora, Dawson, and Callan were the essence of my life, and I'm completely lost without them. My family was the best thing that ever happened to me. I took so much pride in being Lindsay's husband and a dad to Cora, Dawson, and Callan. I always remind myself that each day with them was a new gift. Number 8, the Daybell Case. And speaking of acting like zombies, the Daybell Case has been going on for the last 4 years in Idaho. In 2019, a series of murders occurred in the space of only a few months, with some strange and peculiar aspects to the case. Charles Vallow, Tylee Ryan, JJ Vallow, and Tammy Daybell were all deemed zombies by these two, Lori and Chad Daybell. Charles was Lori's husband at the time, and Tammy was Chad's wife. Tylee and JJ are Lori's children. Chad and Lori were having a secret love affair and were both part of the LDS religion, but they went far, far, far into left field in their beliefs and making up their own along the way. And zombies were just one of the string of beliefs. So in 2019, each person, each family member were killed for insurance money and believed that they needed to kill the zombie that they believed lived inside of each victim. Charles was killed in Lori and Charles' marital home by gunshot. Tylee Ryan killed and buried on Chad's property, cause of death unknown, as she was burned, dismembered, and buried. And JJ suffocated and was taped and wrapped in plastic bags and also buried in Chad Daybell's property. And Tammy Daybell was killed in her marital home and in her marital bed by asphyxia and posed on the ground after her death. And in recent news, the Daybell home was posted for sale for $350,000 with the listing saying to contact the realtor for more info about the tragedy that occurred there. And 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Lori and Chad ran off into the sunset and got married in Hawaii, a wedding that was planned for quite some time and long before these murders. It wasn't until months later that Lori was initially charged with not producing the children, and by June of 2020, the children were found in Chad's yard. Both were caught and sentenced for 3 of the 4 murders. Lori is spending a life sentence and Chad is sentenced to death. There will be an upcoming trial for the murder of Charles Vallow, where currently Lori is on trial for. And there were several searches and texts leading up to the deaths of their family members. But the biggest and strangest one was bodies possessed after original occupant dies. And the couple performed what they called castings to cast out the evil entity that may be living in the body of their victims. But the victims weren't present when conducting these so-called castings. It escalated to the term zombie, and they were even given specific names. Charles was Ned Schneider, and he eventually changed names and ended up as Iplos, also the name Garrett. Tylee was said to have a name of Hillary, and JJ was given one, but we aren't sure what the name is. If you know that, please let me know below. And Tammy was given the name Viola. And there were a lot more searches, but they weren't as obvious other than the term SSW Wind, which happened to be a term that was said to have been searched by Chad Daybell, even though his daughter perjured on the stand in trial, saying that she did the searches. But it happened to be the same day that a stranger came up to Tammy Daybell in her driveway and was shot at by a masked man, but the gun misfired and the gunman ran away. 10 days later, Tammy would die in her bed. And the Daybells operated as a secret society with aliases, burner phones, codes, and the idea that second coming of Christ was coming in 2020. They believed that no one would notice the murders as the world would be too busy worrying about the end of times. And they believed that they would be the ones to lead the 144,000 to the second coming. And now they are sitting in prison. And Lori Daybell will be facing trial in the future in Arizona of the murder of her husband of 15 plus years, Charles Vallow, and the attempt made on her nephew-in-law, Brandon Boudreau. Lori's niece, Melanie Pulowski, would have benefited financially if her husband was killed, Brandon, yet it remained a mystery of how she wasn't charged as well in the conspiracy to commit murder, as there was a whole lot of lies in her story and she was part of that secret society. So stay tuned for that. Charles was a loving husband and stepfather who fought to have Lori checked out when she started talking crazy and threatening and stealing from him, and authorities wouldn't listen to him. And Tylee was a feisty teen who fiercely loved her little brother JJ and was his protector. She was only 16 years at the time, so close to being an adult and getting the heck away from these guys. And JJ, a young little boy with autism who was incredibly gifted in reading and other skills. And Tammy, a loving mother of 5 who worked hard as a librarian and a mother. And Chad was recently convicted and gave the mugshot of a lifetime, showing his true colors. This is the real Chad Daybell. And Lori, convicted in 2023, is said to be still delusional about the murders, especially of her children. Number 7, the Connor Bowman case. The victims, his wife Betty Bowman of only 2 years. A former Mayo Clinic doctor, Connor Bowman of Minnesota, was charged with first-degree murder of his 32-year-old wife Betty Bowman. On August 20th of 2023, Betty drank a smoothie that was tainted with a medication to treat gout. Connor would benefit from a $500,000 life insurance payout. And it seemed that there were some marital issues with the newlyweds, and they carried on in their marriage, it said, with open relationships. But in August of 2023, Betty went to the hospital with severe stomach distress and dehydration. And then things got worse. She experienced cardiac problems, fluid in her lungs, and organ failure, and she then had surgery to remove part of her colon. And Connor had suggested, though, that she was suffering from an infection called HLH, where white blood cells damage organs. And after 4 days, Betty died in the hospital. Interestingly, in her obituary, her cause of death was listed as HLH, but that's not what happened. Betty had traces of a drug called colchicine, a drug used for gout, but she didn't have a previous diagnosis of gout or HLH. And the results concluded that she had the lethal dose in her system around 24 hours before she had symptoms and went to the hospital. Before she was admitted to the hospital, she texted a guy she knew and was said to be seeing as well, and she told him that she was really sick and couldn't sleep. She felt really ill, and then she said that she thought it was her smoothie that was made and given to her by Connor. Interestingly, while Betty was in the hospital, Connor had checked her health records, doctor's notes, and the log from the operating room using his own credentials. And he made himself part of Betty's care team as well. And at first, that might not be so suspicious. But here's where it gets really interesting. Connor made some internet searches, ordered some drugs, and tried to cover his tracks by canceling an autopsy and tried rushing Betty's cremation, not to mention the cause of death he pushed for instead of what she actually died of. But the day after Betty died, the medical examiner stopped the request for her cremation after being told by an unnamed source that the couple were having marriage issues and talking about divorce after infidelity, it was said, and a deteriorating relationship. As for his search history, he searched for terms such as food versus industrial grade sodium nitrate, which sodium nitrate can be used to limit oxygen transport through the body. There was then a Google shop page that he looked at for various vendors selling sodium nitrate. He also calculated Betty's weight to determine what a lethal dosage of colchicine would be. And on Connor's university laptop, where he worked as a poison specialist prior, he searched for poisons and lethal dosages specifically for individuals weighing approximately 120 pounds, which, yep, you can guess what Betty weighed. And there were other searches such as police track package delivery and delete Amazon data, police, and internet browsing history. Can it be used in court? Yep, it sure can. And he also searched for VPNs, which are secure methods of web browsing and can be used by those who, are trying to hide their online activity from law enforcement. And in the days before Betty was killed, Connor actually searched, is widow gender neutral? And then he added the term widower to his Bumble dating profile within weeks of Betty's death. And in that profile, he also allegedly lied about what happened to Betty and the timing of her death, conveniently. And Betty and Connor were only married for 2 years. And according to documents, they had separate bank accounts, and Connor was in some serious debt. Multiple friends said that Connor didn't appear to even mourn Betty's death, and just days after she died, he asked some of them to go for drinks. And Connor is still awaiting trial. His lawyers have now filed 12 motions to suppress evidence and a 13th motion to have the grand jury indictment dismissed against him. And one of Betty's friends said she was really, truly one of a kind individual, so intelligent and caring and lived life to the fullest. Another friend saying her kindness, warmth, and genuine compassion touched the hearts of all who had the privilege of knowing her. Betty's family described her saying that she had a remarkable ability to make everyone feel special. Now, the couple also shared a corgi named Sir Crumpet II of Mulberry. Number 6, the Corey Richens case. Victim Eric Richens, husband of Corey Richens, and potential victims, their 3 children. A 33-year-old Utah mother of 3, Corey Richens, is charged with the murder of her 39-year-old husband, Eric, who was killed back in March of 2022. She allegedly poisoned him with a fentanyl-laced cocktail before he went to bed. She said they were celebrating a closing on a home. But Corey was holding on to a big, dark secret. More like a few secrets. Corey had been in an affair with the handyman, and she purchased illegal drugs and first attempted to poison Eric by lacing his sandwich on Valentine's Day. She left his lunch on the seat of his truck with a note and then left for the day to meet up with her lover. Weeks later, she purchased more drugs, wanting something stronger, she allegedly said, and calling it the Michael Jackson stuff. And when Eric went to bed in March of 2022, she said he had a Moscow Mule drink to celebrate, and he died with 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. His autopsy also revealed he had some of Corey's prescription medication in his system as well. And that night there was some pretty suspicious details about his death and the timeline, since Corey conveniently put herself in her kid's room for some time before finding him, in my opinion. I'll have the video below. Now, Corey went on to create a children's book about Eric's death on the topic of grief. She was even interviewed on TV. Eric's sister Amy talked about the book in court and her audacity to not only write it, but use their kids' names as well. Amy pled with the judge to not release Corey, as she had numerous insurance policies on the children as well and feared they were next. Now, here are some of Corey's little internet searches. What is a lethal dose of fentanyl? Death certificate says pending. Will life insurance still pay? Can cops force you to do a lie detector test? How to permanently delete information from an iPhone remotely? What is considered non-natural manner of death? If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? And my personal favorite, luxury prisons for the rich in America. I feel like we should just take a little time out on that term. Let's really stop and think about that. There are all these little details, and she Googles luxury prisons. I mean, what is she expecting? She kills, allegedly, takes the insurance, Googles her way through it all, and then just ends up in a country club, or as Forbes called it years ago, Club Fed. And one more thing, she's not rich. She's far from it. She's deeply in debt. And recently she was deemed indigent by the courts. Corey was in a crazy amount of debt. She owed lenders more than $1.8 million. And by the way, at the time of the murder, that unfinished mansion she was closing on, she held a party just after Eric's death, much like in the style of Lori Vallow Daybell. Corey's preliminary hearing is scheduled this August of 2024, but it was postponed from May over some drama in court. First, the defense filed a motion and wanted the prosecution kicked off the case, and there were recorded jail calls between Corey and her lawyer, Sky Lazaro, and Sky accused the prosecution of listening to these recordings, among other accusations. Then, the defense withdrew as counsel, and Corey had to get new representation. I did a video on that drama. You can see it in the description box below. Corey maintains her innocence though, and she says that she's been kept from her children all this time, and she said, quote, "This means war." Corey's behavior in court though has been really questionable. She's been seen smirking during her hearings, fake crying, rolling her eyes, shaking her head. If convicted killers Leticia, Stout, and Lori Vallow Daybell had a baby sister, Corey would be it. Even Corey's lawyer was picking up a tissue for Corey and cueing her, but Corey didn't even know what to do with the tissue. She grabs it, then she puts her finger to her eye while she's holding the Kleenex. I think it's going to be a very interesting preliminary hearing coming up. What do you think? I do have a YouTube short also on Corey laughing and smirking. I'll have that in below as well. Now, as for Eric, his obituary states Eric loved fully, laughed loudly, and lived life with reckless abandon. He enjoyed great adventures to far off places, but also cherished the small and finer things in life. Eric was a family man who always strove to be the absolute best father and husband. He was an attentive and loving father to his 3 sons and devoted husband to the love of his life. Eric did absolutely everything in his power to provide his family with every possible opportunity to learn, grow, and have fun. Number 5, Casey Anthony case. Victim, 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee Anthony. On July of 2008, little toddler Kaylee Anthony was reported missing by her grandma, Cindy Anthony, in Orlando, Florida. She reported she hadn't seen her granddaughter in 31 days. And Cindy told the dispatcher, "There is something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car." Cindy reported that her 22-year-old daughter, Casey, gave her multiple stories about Kaylee's whereabouts and eventually admitted that she hadn't seen Kaylee for weeks. And Casey's story time telling didn't end there though, when she then told a dispatcher that her daughter had been kidnapped by a nanny, Zanny the nanny, a claim that was proven false and ridiculous. Casey was charged with child neglect, giving false statements, and obstruction. And the media had photos of Casey partying it up while her daughter was missing, and she didn't seem like she was grieving like one would expect a mother to, even though people do grieve in their own ways. But Casey was acting odd. People called her a psychopath, even though she was determined by an independent psychologist that she wasn't. Now, by October of that year, so 3 months after Kaylee was reported missing, a grand jury indicted Casey on first-degree murder. Even though Kaylee's body wasn't found yet, she pled not guilty. The little girl's body was found 5 months after her disappearance in December of 2008 in a wooded area less than a mile from the Anthony home. And the medical examiner listed Kaylee's cause of death as homicide by undetermined means. Cadaver dogs detected human decomposition in 2 places, in Casey's car and in the Anthony's backyard. Now let's talk about Casey's searches, because someone in that Anthony household, using a password-protected account that Casey used, did a search for foolproof suffocation, how to make chloroform, and also household weapons and neck breaking. In the 6-week trial in May of 2011, Casey's defense presented a different theory that Kaylee's death was accidental and that the grandfather of Kaylee and father of Casey, George Anthony, helped his daughter cover it up by disposing of her body. The prosecution stated that you don't cover up an accident by making it look like murder. They offered that Casey used chloroform on Kaylee before suffocating her with duct tape and left the body in the trunk of her car before disposing of her body nearby. Now note, Kaylee was found with duct tape over her jaw. However, in trial, it was argued that the tape was put on after death. And side note, the amount of lies that Casey has presented over the years have been truly astonishing. This whole case has been throughout this years, and it's still talked about to this day. Did you follow that case? Let me know below. And in July of 2011, the jury found Casey not guilty on the charges of murder and child abuse, and she was released. Hundreds of angry protesters were waiting outside, and Casey's acquittal of murder truly stunned and angered the public. She, for the most part, has since stayed out of the limelight. However, in 2017, she broke her silence and gave an interview saying, quote, "I don't give a about what anyone thinks about me. I never will. I'm okay with myself. I sleep pretty good at night." In 2022, she did a docuseries called Casey Anthony, Where the Truth Lies. She blamed her father, saying he was responsible for Kaylee's death. Her story kept changing, and it wasn't the nanny. She said Kaylee died in an accidental drowning, but she did admit that she was dishonest to investigators, but said, quote, "I lied. My lies always have a kernel of truth in them, but I lied because that's what I was told to do." Do you believe her? Let me know below. In the beginning of this year, there was a special on TV on Peacock where George and Cindy did a polygraph publicly, and Casey made some serious allegations against her father. Did you see it? Now, Cindy said she believes that Casey knows 100% what happened to Kaylee, and she hopes that one day she would confess, though I don't think that will ever happen. Kaylee's law was inspired by this tragic case of little Kaylee Anthony and mandates that parents or guardians must report a missing child within 24 hours or report a child's death within an hour. Variations of Kaylee's law have been enacted in multiple states across the U.S. I was looking on Kaylee's obituary. It didn't have anything, but it did have 4,700 comments on her obituary page. Number 4, the Barry Morphew case. His victim, his wife of over 25 years, Suzanne Morphew. 49-year-old Suzanne Morphew was reported missing on Mother's Day back in 2020 in the small town of Maysville, Colorado. Reports said that she went for a bike ride and never returned, but quickly her husband, Barry, came under scrutiny by the authorities and the public. Throughout the investigation, disturbing evidence surfaced, and Barry's actions were odd to say the least. Barry created a few different narratives and even created a 25-second plea video without law enforcement's knowledge or recommendation for his wife's return from a kidnapper, 1 second for every year of marriage. He never attended vigils for his wife or helped in searches to find his missing wife. There was chatter, however, 2 months after the disappearance that he moved on and found himself a girlfriend, and it was confirmed by Fall that he did in fact have one. A year after Suzanne's disappearance on May of 2021, Barry was arrested for Suzanne's murder. Her body was yet to be found at that time, but in April of 2022, his charges were dismissed without prejudice due to prosecutorial discovery violations, but that means that if new evidence emerged, that he can be charged yet again. And in September of 2023, Suzanne's remains were discovered in a shallow grave only 40 minutes away from the home, leading to renewed hope for closure in this case and justice. But months went by waiting for the official autopsy results, and in April of 2024, they were finally completed. Suzanne's cause of death was a cocktail of animal tranquilizers, and Barry had told investigators that the day before Suzanne was reported missing, he was out shooting chipmunks around the property when the authorities noticed and questioned him on his cell phone pinging all over the place, and theorized that was when Barry was chasing Suzanne all over the house. And law enforcement found a dart gun and items used to inject tranquilizer into darts that were in Barry's gun safe, but didn't find chemicals in the house. They did, however, find a dart cap in the dryer. The day Suzanne was reported missing, Barry also did an impromptu trip to Broomfield, Colorado, saying that he had work to do, but it was a Sunday, and that was a lie. But Barry was seen on camera disposing of garbage at multiple locations and dumpsters, and he made multiple clothing changes as well. Witnesses say his room reeked really strong of chlorine. Now, although Barry's internet searches didn't directly point to Suzanne's disappearance and murder, I feel it is really important to include these searches, and it's important to note that Suzanne and Barry were definitely having issues in their marriage. Suzanne was done with him and said so in text right before her disappearance and death. She also found comfort in another man, and she, yes, was having an affair. Barry, though, isn't innocent either. He had some really interesting searches, and ones that involve teens that I think should be further looked into, because those are the ones that we only know about. So his deleted web searches were older man, younger woman, relationships, YouTube. Gets worse. Third base, my first hand job, Dear Teen Diary, 9th grade entry 14, YouTube. And How to Make a Girl Orgasm, YouTube. Apparently, Barry was defensive over being questioned about these terms. He denied he searched them, but said that Suzanne had no problem in the bedroom finishing. And in the affidavit, it said that Suzanne said sex with Barry was not pleasurable. And these searches were conducted in January of 2020, 4 months before Suzanne's disappearance. Barry also searched for AshleyMadison.com, a site for cheating spouses. Also, that month he accessed localsnapsext.com, find a cute girl near Salida, and come get dirty. Of course, he denied all of these searches, and his story changed just like it did with Suzanne and her whereabouts. In real life, though, people throughout the town had mentioned that Barry would hit on women and also at the gym, and these women would feel uncomfortable around him. Suzanne had suspected that he was cheating long before she had an affair with her lover. In fact, she suspected before when she and Barry lived in Indiana, and she was done with him and his dirty ways. Although Barry hasn't been arrested again at this time of this recording, I know thousands upon thousands of people waiting for the announcement that he is. And hopefully justice will be served up piping hot to Barry Morphew for the murder of his wife, Suzanne Morphew. And Suzanne was known as a very kind woman who loved her daughters deeply, and she struggled with cancer not once but twice and was going through treatment up until her disappearance. There have been a lot of comments about their daughter's behavior during the investigation and that they back their father 100%, even though it doesn't look good for Barry, or as we call him here, Bear. Now, we await justice and wait for the news of his arrest. Number 3, the Douglas Garland case. Victims, 5-year-old Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents, Catherine and Alvin Lickness. This is a Canadian case and the area that I live in. In June of 2014, Calgary, Alberta, Canada was rocked by the disappearance and murders of 5-year-old Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents, Catherine and Alvin Lickness. Little Nathan was given the option the day before they were murdered to visit the Calgary Zoo or go visit his grandparents, and he chose to spend time with his grandparents, who were soon planning to move a few hours away to Edmonton and spend a lot of their time also in Mexico. That day, Catherine and Alvin were having an estate sale at their home. When Nathan arrived, his grandpa took him to the playground, and once the estate sale was over, they ordered Chinese food and watched a movie together along with Nathan's mom, Jennifer. And Nathan had spent the night at his grandparents' house for a sleepover. His mom and little 1-year-old brother did too, but the 1-year-old woke up in the middle of the night, and his mom grabbed him and took him home, leaving Nathan still sleeping with the grandparents at their home. The next morning, on June 30th, the mother woke up, got the little one ready, and called Kathy, but there was no answer. When she arrived at the house, the 3 were gone, and the house was covered in a trail of blood. She said there was blood on the beds, the walls, and in the kitchen, and there were pools of blood and hand marks on the wall as well. A massive search kicked off, prompting Alberta's longest Amber Alert, and their bodies were never found. The prime suspect, Douglas Garland, who knew Catherine and Alvin, as Alvin's son was in a common law relationship with Douglas' sister, and Alvin and Douglas was said to have had a business history together from back in 2006. Douglas was said to have harbored a grudge over a patent dispute dating back to then, and it was said that when Douglas Garland found out that Catherine and Alvin were planning on moving and leaving Calgary, he made the decision to act on the grudge and retaliate. And Douglas had a rural property which was just outside the city of Calgary. It was searched by the authorities and revealed disturbing evidence. Aerial footage captured 2 adults believing to be Kathy and Alvin, who were lying face down near an outbuilding on Garland's farm, along with a little body lying nearby them, curled up on the grass. The bodies, however, disappeared following the next day's aerial search. And law enforcement found a capture kit on the farm consisting of a duffel bag with handcuffs, large and small, a large knife, and a billy club. When they arrived at the farm, a burn barrel was still smoldering. Investigators spent the next 10 months sifting through ashes on Garland's farm looking for evidence. The grandparents and their grandson was said to have been burned in that barrel after Douglas killed them. DNA evidence was also found on a saw and 2 meat hooks on that property, and bones and a tiny tooth was found in the large burn barrel. Investigators discovered incriminating search terms on a hidden hard drive in Garland's home, which included terms such as most painful torture, bone grinder, and human dissection, and how to drill out a certain type of lock. The very type of lock was disabled with a power drill the night the family went missing at the Lickness' home. Also searches such as force needed for concussion, and this next one, which is very interesting, how to kill without emotion. What was he expecting to find in those results? Also, what investigators discovered in this hidden drive in Garland's basement were manuals. They were said to be titled How to Become an Effective Assassin, Death Dealer's Manual, How to Kill, Hitman and Murder Inc., an autopsy manual, 18 documents on killing or murder, and a folder called Gore with 87 photos of dead and dismembered people, and it was said it was accessed the day after the family disappeared. It kind of reminds me of the Gilgo Beach case, doesn't it? Douglas Garland was arrested 2 weeks after the murders on July 14th, 2014, and one of the details before his arrest that helped bust him was a green truck was seen on CCTV footage on the street of the family's home the night they disappeared, and Garland's sister recognized the truck that was released by the police, and she sent the photo to Alvin's son, and he forwarded that to police. And in 2017, Douglas Garland was convicted on all charges, sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences with no chance of parole for 75 years. He appealed in 2021, but that was rejected. And this case sparked outrage and left a very big lasting impact on Calgary's community. There was another case that I covered as well from Calgary called the Robert Lehman case, where Robert lived with his girlfriend and her daughter and he murdered them. He was also interviewed while drunk by reporters, and he scattered bacon around their house to throw off the dogs. I'll have that link below. Douglas Garland wasn't a stranger to criminal charges. He had an assault charge in 1989, 2 counts of possession of a prohibited weapon in 1988 and 99, and in 1992, the RCMP busted a meth lab on the farm where he lived with his parents and charged him with drug trafficking and possession of stolen property. He also stole the identification of a teenager who was killed in a car crash. The list goes on. Now, Nathan's mom, Jennifer, said about her little boy that Nathan was just truly a kind, loving, happy boy. She described him as a chatterbox who loved superheroes. And when the foreman of the jury read the final verdict, the courtroom gallery actually cheered. For Catherine, in her obituary, it stated that she accepted people without prejudice or judgment. She loved the holidays and worked hard to make everyone feel special. About Alvin, in his obituary, it stated, when he hugged his children, they could feel his love and pride for them radiating like the sun. He commented with wonder on his wife's beauty, both inside and out. Number 2, the Leticia Stout case. Victim, 11-year-old Gannon Stout, stepson to Leticia. Leticia Stout is convicted of killing her 11-year-old stepson Gannon Stout in Colorado Springs, Colorado, back in January of 2020. She quickly became the suspect in the case when Gannon was reported missing by Leticia and told them he was a runaway, but odd behavior from her made a lot of people raise some eyebrows and do some digging into it, law enforcement included. While the close-knit community and law enforcement scoured the area for clues and any signs of Gannon, Leticia did not participate in the search for him. She did, however, introduce a fictitious character to her narrative named Eduardo with a G, and her story about Gannon kept changing. Story upon story, she lied to her husband and Gannon's father, Al Stout, and made derogatory remarks about Gannon's mom, Landon Hyatt. Gannon was egregiously killed on January 27th, but his body wasn't found until 2 months later, 1,900 miles away in Pace, Florida, under a bridge in a suitcase. His cause of death was 18 stab wounds, 4 blunt force trauma wounds, and 1 bullet to the head. And Leticia had first dumped his body north of Colorado Springs and then went back and retrieved his body, rented a van, and transported his body across the country to Florida. Initial reports of her internet search history sounded like a bitter stepmother asking Google for help and a vent, but it took a sinister turn during the investigation and her searches. Some of the venting searchers said, "I'm over here doing all the work for my stepkids and their mom doesn't help. One day, some people will wish they treated you differently. I wonder if my husband's ex-wife is sending me a card since I raise her kids, and police steps for our runaway." Then they become more sinister. How long does a body decompose in a bag? Find people who want to go to jail. Casey Anthony, Casey, Anthony, and Patrick McKenna. Patrick is a private investigator who believes Casey is innocent. He also worked on the O.J. Simpson case. More searches, such as face transplant near me, first face transplant woman, address of drug cartels, like they're going to show that. What are some Mexican drug cartel phone numbers? Do they check in ditches under bridges? Maintenance under ditches under bridges? Now think about these searches and how crazy they are, but wait, there's more. Find an immigrant who will admit to a crime. Fingerprint rubber. Now, as I mentioned, Gannon was found under a bridge in Florida. He was tossed in a suitcase from the bridge, and electronic data placed Leticia at the area from her cell phone records. Miraculously, there was maintenance work being done in the area, and workers found the suitcase, opened it up, and found Gannon in there and called the cops. Also notable, Leticia Googled, "Can you get away with fake lie detector website?" Leticia went to a website called fakepolygraph.com and submitted what she wanted the results to say for a fee. And she called numerous times to get the results. The owner, however, went to the authorities with it and messaged her and said he wasn't going to do that. She legit, though, asked for her money back in true Leticia style. And Leticia pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but the jury found her guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, murder of a child under 12 by a person in a position of trust, tampering with physical evidence, and tampering with the deceased body. Her sentence was life without the possibility of parole, plus sentencing for her other charges, which are to be served consecutively. And the judge admonished Leticia for claiming mental illness and that it was a disservice to those who actually suffer from it. He said, "You have shown no remorse during this process." Leticia's behavior was ridiculous in court. She behaved like a child, flipping the finger, putting her head on the table. It was really, really bad. She got exactly what she deserves, and she is the epitome of evil. And even before her trial, she wrote letters to the judge. She said that she had threats under peanut butter, and she even tried to break out of jail. The list goes on. After her sentencing, she stayed a short time in a Colorado prison and then was actually transferred to a Kansas prison, and it's not known what that reason was for. And Gannon will always be remembered. His case was one of the first few that I started here on this channel on It's a Crime. I followed it every single day, stayed up at night hoping that he would be found alive. I created dozens of videos on the case. He will never ever be forgotten. And we call Gannon our little buddy. He was known to his family as G-Man and Bubba. He loved Sonic the Hedgehog, loved video games. He was kind and smart and loved to tell jokes. His family and two little sisters loved him immensely, and the Wicked Witch took that all away from him. I have a ton of videos on the case. I'll have that below. Number 1, the Brian Walsh case. Victim Anna Walsh, his wife. On January 4th, 2023, 39-year-old Anna Walsh, and mother of 3, was reported missing in Massachusetts by her employer and her husband, Brian Walsh. Brian said that he last saw Anna on New Year's Day and that Anna left early for a flight due to work emergency. But authorities found that she never got on that flight, and in fact, her credit and debit cards hadn't been used since the 1st. And on New Year's Eve, though, Anna, Brian, and Brian's friend were together to ring in 2023. Anna was last seen around 4 a.m. Brian was arrested on January 8th and charged with misleading the police and lying about his own whereabouts. In other words, his alibi did not add up. He told authorities that he had been to CVS and Whole Foods on January 1st, the very day in question and the night Anna was last seen. He also said Anna took a rideshare from their home on the 1st, which was a lie. And on January 2nd, Brian went on a little shopping spree, spending $450 on cleaning supplies. He was seen on surveillance and purchased 5 5-gallon buckets, a hacksaw, 48 terry cloth towels, a full coverage suit, 200 disposable rags, trash bags, and cleaning products. He also went to a CVS store where he was also seen on surveillance and bought 13 different types of hydrogen peroxide. He also visited a dumpster with a heavy garbage bag. He went to another area and discarded things in a dumpster there. It really does sound like the Barry Morphew case. It gives me that kind of vibe to it. The authorities acquired a search warrant, and in the Walsh residence and in the basement, basement, they found blood and a damaged bloody knife. Now, Brian wasn't a stranger to crime. He pled guilty in 2021 on 3 charges of fraud that had to do with selling counterfeit Andy Warhol works, and at the time of Anna's disappearance, he was on house arrest and awaiting sentencing. By January 18th, he was arrested again and charged with her murder, but he pled not guilty. Now, check out these internet searches because there's a reason why he's in the #1 spot. He also used his son's iPad to do these searches, no less. Is it better to put crime scene clothes away or wash them? 10 ways to dispose of a body if you really needed to. How long for someone to be missing to inherit? Can you throw away body parts? Dismemberment and the best way to dispose of a body. What happens when you put body parts in ammonia? Hacksaw best tool to dismember. What is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on a surface in the woods? Can baking soda make a body smell good? And can you identify a body with broken teeth? Cleaning up blood. Now, the prosecution accused Brian of dismembering Anna and disposing of her remains in dumpsters. Also, according to the prosecution, Brian would be the sole beneficiary to Anna's $2.7 million life insurance policy. His case, though, has yet to go to trial. However, in recent news, the state DNA lab should be having results on about a dozen items or so soon. October 2nd of 2024 is the next hearing date for discovery motions, and Anna's body was never recovered. A friend of Anna's said about her, "It's astounding. Most people go through life and we all want to make an impact. She truly did. The world has lost a great person." Now, I'm curious, what are your last Google searches? Post them below, because you know with our curiosity in true crime, they probably are a little questionable. Let's talk about it below. Check out the bizarre last words from notorious serial killers before execution here. I have extra details of the cases that are unique. And check out here what YouTube thinks you'd like to watch.